You know that feeling when the room goes silent, but your heartbeat gets louder? That's how it started for me. The lights at the ballroom shimmered over crystal glasses and fake smiles. Our 10th anniversary gala. Ryan had planned it, or so I thought. He said it was to celebrate us, his ride or die. I remember laughing at that phrase when he said it earlier that week. Now it just feels like poison. I was wearing a gold satin gown. The kind that made me feel like I finally fit into his world. The world of investors, polished teeth, and practiced charm. For once, I thought I'd done everything right. I'd supported him through his failed startup, I'd cooked through his depression, and I'd even ignored the late-night work calls. Then it happened. He stood on the stage with that smug confidence I used to find attractive. "I want to thank the most important woman in my life," he said into the mic. I smiled. I actually clapped. Then he turned toward her, not me, and said her name. "And that's for you, Vanessa." The crowd froze. There was an awkward cough, some nervous laughter, and me, standing there with a champagne glass in my hand, trying not to shatter it. Vanessa, his new business partner. The woman I'd introduced him to. The one I'd coached for her first interview. He kissed her. Right there. Under the chandelier. That's when I realized something inside me had snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my drink. I just stood there and let the humiliation sink in like a slow poison. Every eye in the room was on me. Pity, curiosity, satisfaction. The wives whispered. The husbands avoided my gaze. My mother-in-law smirked. I walked out quietly, but I still remember the way the cold night air hit my face. Sharp, clean, like a slap that woke me up. On the ride home, I stared at the blinking city lights. My reflection in the car window looked like a ghost, hollow, trembling, angry. I whispered to myself, "You married a fraud." By the time I reached our house, my hands were steady again. I took off the gown, folded it carefully, and placed it in the closet. Then I sat down at his office desk, opened his laptop, and just stared at the login screen. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that exact moment, was the start of something darker. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I was going to learn everything. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. The house was too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you hear every tick of the clock. At 2:47 a.m., I was sitting in Ryan's office, still in my robe, staring at his laptop like it was a loaded gun. I didn't have the password, but I knew his patterns. His ego made him predictable. Birthday. Anniversary. His dog's name from college. Then it hit me, Vanessa's birthday. It worked. When his desktop opened, I swear my pulse slowed for a second. There it was, a folder labeled consulting deals. Inside, not just business files, but messages. Screenshots. Receipts. Photos from trips he said were board retreats. He wasn't just cheating. He was funneling money through her company. My money. The house, the car, even the damn gala, all partially paid from my savings account, which I'd merged into his for easier budgeting. I scrolled through every email, every smirking photo of them in hotel lobbies, and I felt my stomach tighten. Not from heartbreak, but from focus. He wasn't careful. He was arrogant. I opened my own bank statements next. Transactions I didn't recognize. Transfers to shell accounts. One of them was under a name I remembered, a fake LLC he'd registered for consulting. Vanessa was listed as the co-signer. That's when I whispered out loud, "You're not just unfaithful. You're a thief." For the first time in months, I smiled. You see, before I married Ryan, I worked in finance. I quit after we got married because he said, "You don't need to work, we're a team." He never liked that I was better with numbers. Now, that skill was about to become my weapon. By dawn, I'd taken screenshots of every document, downloaded every file, and saved them to an encrypted flash drive. I hid it inside the lining of an old perfume box. Then I cleaned up everything, browser history, fingerprints, lights off, robe folded. By the time Ryan walked in at 7 a.m., reeking of guilt and whiskey, I was already making breakfast. He looked surprised. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, cracking an egg into the pan. He poured coffee, pretending everything was fine. He didn't even mention the gala. Not one word. That was his game, pretend it didn't happen. Gaslight until I doubted my own eyes. I let him. For now. For the next few weeks, I played the perfect wife, calm, supportive, detached. I started taking yoga classes again, but really, I was visiting a lawyer and a private investigator. The lawyer told me something that stuck. If he's mixing your funds with fraudulent business activity, you could take him down completely. But you'll need proof, not emotion. That's exactly what I gathered. I collected documents, voice recordings, screenshots, even transaction trails between his company and Vanessa's. Every piece felt like a brick in the wall I was building around myself. He thought I was broken, but I was rebuilding. Quietly. And every night before bed, I whispered to myself, don't just leave. Win. 3 weeks after the gala, I had everything I needed, except the right timing. Ryan still came home late, pretending to be exhausted. He'd kiss my forehead, mumble something about investors, and collapse into bed beside me. I'd watch his face in the dark, wondering if guilt ever visited him. It didn't look like it. The more I watched, the calmer I became. That calmness scared me, not because I felt nothing, but because I felt too much clarity. I stopped reacting, stopped confronting. Instead, I began planning. I knew his next big move, a joint investment pitch event at his firm, where he and Vanessa would present a new tech fund. I overheard him talking about it on the phone one morning, how they'd use my property as collateral to secure investor confidence. My property, the one I bought before I married him. That was it, my line in the sand. I started meeting with my lawyer, Rebecca, more often. She was sharp, no sugarcoating, no sympathy. You want to hit him where it hurts, she said one day. Don't destroy him emotionally. Destroy his credibility. I told her about the fake LLCs and the fund transfers. She nodded. If you can tie his affair partner to that money trail, you can freeze his accounts before he even realizes he's being investigated. That became the plan. But I couldn't let him suspect a thing. So I acted like I was trying to move on. I dressed better, smiled more, cooked his favorite meals again. I even laughed at his jokes, the same ones that used to make my skin crawl. And it worked. He started letting his guard down. One night, I watched him unlock his phone beside me. His passcode was the same, 0906, Vanessa's birthday. I pretended to be asleep as he messaged her. I didn't need to see the words. I knew the rhythm of betrayal by then. What he didn't know was that my investigator had already cloned his phone data from a backup. I had every message he'd sent for the past 6 months. There was one in particular that hit me like a slow punch. She's not going anywhere. She's too scared to live without me. I reread that line over and over until I couldn't feel my hands. Then I laughed. Quietly. Because for the first time, he was wrong. The next morning, I started moving money, discreetly, strategically. I withdrew from our joint account in small increments, transferring into a private trust under my maiden name. I opened a new credit card. I sold my old jewelry, the ones he never noticed, and put the cash aside. At night, I'd sit on the balcony, glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights, planning the life I'd build without him. Then came the twist I didn't expect. Vanessa called me. Her voice was shaky, rehearsed. Hey, I think you should know, Ryan's in some financial trouble. He said you might help. I hung up before she could finish. My hands were cold, but my mind was on fire. If she was calling me for help, it meant something had gone wrong. And I was going to find out exactly what. Vanessa calling me was like a crack in a perfect mask. I didn't pick up again, but I replayed her words in my head all night. Financial trouble. Might help. It was almost funny. The man who once lectured me about financial discipline was now broke enough that his mistress was calling me for help. The next day, I played dumb. I made coffee, kissed his cheek, asked about work. He snapped. Don't start with questions, Sarah. I'm under pressure. Pressure. That was my opening. By now, my investigator had gathered proof of Ryan's side deals, shady investments, fake invoices, and false tax claims. The tech fund he'd hyped up was collapsing. One of the early investors had backed out after realizing there were no actual assets behind the numbers. Ryan's confidence started crumbling. He drank more, slept less, argued over nothing. And for the first time, he was the one losing control. I started recording everything. Quietly. The voice recorder app became my silent witness. Every fight, every lie, every drunken confession. One night, around 11 p.m., I heard him on the phone in the study. The door was half open. His voice was sharp, panicked. No, Vanessa, you listen to me. If this leaks, we're both finished. She can't know. She's not that smart. I froze, then smiled. That sentence, she's not that smart, became my fuel. 2 days later, I met Rebecca, my lawyer, at a quiet cafe. I slid a USB drive across the table. Everything you asked for. Transfers, screenshots, phone logs. She nodded, her tone calm. We'll initiate a financial fraud inquiry anonymously. Once it's flagged, the IRS will freeze all linked accounts pending investigation. It'll look like an internal audit. I asked her, what happens to his company? She looked me straight in the eye. It burns. That night, I made sure dinner was perfect, candles, music, his favorite steak. He seemed relieved, maybe even hopeful. You're really forgiving, huh? He said. I smiled. You have no idea. We clinked glasses. He talked about new beginnings. I just listened, memorizing every delusional word. The next morning, while he was in the shower, I received an email alert. The subject line read, Financial Activity Review Initiated. It had begun. I walked to the window, coffee in hand, and watched him rush out for work like nothing was wrong. The arrogance in his stride. The belief that he was untouchable. By noon, 3 of his accounts were frozen. By evening, his office was calling nonstop. By night, Vanessa's social media was gone, deleted, wiped clean. And for the first time since that gala, I slept like a baby. The next day, he came home pale, sweating. It's all frozen. Every account. They said there's an investigation. I kept my face neutral. You must have done something wrong. He slammed his fist on the table. Don't you dare talk to me like that. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized the man standing in front of me wasn't powerful anymore. He was just scared. I almost pitied him. Almost. Because I knew what was coming next. Ryan didn't go to work for 3 days after the accounts froze. He paced the house like a caged animal, muttering into his phone, snapping at me, calling lawyers who didn't answer anymore. He'd lost control of the company, the money, and the narrative. And he didn't even know who to blame. I made sure of that. The beauty of subtle revenge is in watching someone destroy themselves while thinking they're fixing things. On the 4th day, he finally broke the silence. Sarah, he said, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. You know I'd never do anything to hurt us, right? I turned from the sink, pretending to think. That depends on what you mean by hurt. He didn't reply. He just stared at me like he was trying to read my face, to figure out whether I knew. That night, he drank until he passed out on the couch. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Vanessa's name flashed again and again. I didn't need to check. I already knew their world was falling apart. By morning, his company email had been suspended. He got a call from the bank manager. Then another from a former partner. All of them angry, confused, threatening legal action. He sat at the kitchen table, pale and sweating. They think I laundered money through Vanessa's firm. I said nothing. Just sipped my coffee and watched him. Because they weren't wrong. He had used her company to hide assets. And I'd made sure the right authorities got every single file that proved it. The best part? It all looked like the leak came from inside his own network. He left the house that day, shouting into his phone, I'll fix this. I didn't expect him back that night. He didn't come home for 3. When he finally did, he looked smaller. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Vanessa's gone, he said flatly. She took everything. Her company account, the car, even the office furniture. I tilted my head. You mean your company account? He glared at me, realizing too late what I'd just confirmed. You knew, he said slowly. I met his stare. I did. For a moment, the air between us was thick, rage, humiliation, disbelief. Then he laughed bitterly. You think this makes you better than me? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because at that moment, the doorbell rang. It was a process server. Mr. Ryan Blake? You've been served. The man handed him a thick envelope. Financial fraud and embezzlement notice. His hands shook as he opened it, reading the words that would end his career. He looked up at me, jaw trembling. Did you? I smiled faintly. You always said we were a team. He stared at me for a long time, then stormed out of the house. The sound of his car engine fading down the street was the sound of my freedom. But revenge, I learned, doesn't bring peace right away. The quiet after the storm felt heavier than I expected. I sat alone that night, the same seat I'd once waited in for his return from business trips. But this time, I wasn't waiting. I was planning the next step, the rebuild. Because taking him down was only half the story. The rest was about taking back everything he'd taken from me, and making sure I came out richer, stronger, untouchable. After Ryan left that night, the house felt hollow, but not empty. For the first time in years, the silence belonged to me. I started every morning with black coffee and a notebook. Lists, plans, numbers. Not dreams, blueprints. I'd spent a decade running his home and his errands, watching him build fake empires. Now, I was going to build something real. The investigation dragged on for months. His assets were frozen. Vanessa disappeared overseas. His partners sued him for breach of contract. Meanwhile, I quietly reclaimed everything tied to my name. The property, the accounts, even the trust I'd built under my maiden name. My lawyer, Rebecca, was impressed. "You're ahead of the curve," she said one afternoon. "Most women just want out. You're building back smarter." I smiled. He used me to look stable. I'm using his downfall to become stable. She laughed softly. Poetic. But it wasn't poetry. It was survival. I took a consulting job with a small firm downtown. The same kind of place Ryan once mocked as too small to matter. Within 6 months, I was leading projects, handling accounts, managing portfolios bigger than his entire fake fund ever was. My financial background became my armor. My precision, my language. At night, I studied investment law. Not for revenge, for power. I wanted to understand every loophole, every clause he once used to manipulate people. Then came the unexpected twist. A journalist reached out. She was writing an exposé on corporate fraud and had stumbled across my name in court documents. "I heard you were the whistleblower," she said carefully. I didn't deny it. We met for coffee, and I told her my story, selectively. Enough truth to expose Ryan's deceit, but not enough to link me directly to the anonymous tip that started it all. A month later, the article went live. Headline: "The Fall of a Self-Made Man, How Lies and Love Funded a Fraud." Ryan's name trended for all the wrong reasons. His reputation gone. His network gone. And suddenly people started calling me. I was invited to speak at financial literacy events, women's business panels, podcasts about recovery after betrayal. Every interview began the same way. "How did you rebuild after such public humiliation?" I told them the truth. By learning to separate love from loyalty. By the end of that year, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. I'd bought my own condo, started a small financial consulting business, and built an online following of women who'd been through similar stories. Sometimes I'd still see Ryan's name pop up. Lawsuits, bankruptcy filings, debt settlements. Each headline felt lighter than the last. One night, scrolling through my phone, I saw a photo of him, older, thinner, standing outside a courthouse in a wrinkled suit. The caption read, "Former CEO faces foreclosure." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. Because the truth was, revenge had stopped matching the moment I stopped living in his shadow. But fate wasn't done with us yet. 2 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. A voice I hadn't heard in almost a year said, "Sarah, it's me. I need your help." "Ryan." I didn't answer at first. I just stared at the phone, watching his name flash on the screen. Ryan Blake. Part of me wanted to hang up. Another part of me wanted to hear just how far he'd fallen. So I picked up. His voice was nothing like I remembered. It was tired, cracked, almost desperate. "Sarah, please. I don't know who else to call." I didn't say anything. Just silence, the kind that makes a liar squirm. He continued. "They froze everything. The settlement's gone, my accounts are empty. Vanessa took off to Bali with what was left. He choked on the next word. "I'm homeless." For a moment, I felt something. Not pity, exactly, more like disbelief. The man who once threw $10,000 dinners for investors couldn't afford rent. He asked to meet. Against my better judgment, I said yes. I needed closure, or maybe proof that the nightmare was really over. We met at a small diner off the highway, one of those places that smelled like burnt coffee and old regrets. He walked in wearing a faded jacket, eyes darting like a man afraid of being recognized. "Sarah," he said softly, sitting across from me. "You look good." I looked at him. "You don't." He exhaled, his shoulders sinking. I deserved that. For the next 20 minutes, he talked. About losing everything. About Vanessa. About how nobody in the business world would touch him now. He even claimed he wanted to start fresh. Then came the real reason he called. "I know you have connections now," he said. "You've got your own firm, investors." I was wondering if maybe. I interrupted. "You want me to help you?" He looked down. "Just until I can get back on my feet. A small loan, maybe. I'll pay you back." That's when I laughed, not loud, but long enough for him to flinch. "You remember that night at the Gala?" I said. "When you kissed her in front of everyone. When you looked at me like I was nothing." He swallowed hard. "I was stupid." "No, Ryan," I said, leaning closer. "You were sure I'd never recover. That's the part that still burns." He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled it back. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I really am." I nodded slowly. I believe you. But you know what the difference between us is. He looked up, confused. I learn from pain. You just repeat it. He stared at me, speechless, while I stood up, dropped a few bills on the table for my coffee, and grabbed my coat. At the door, I turned once more. Ryan, you made me strong by trying to break me. I guess in some twisted way, I should thank you. He didn't answer. Just sat there, small and broken, staring at the cold coffee in front of him. Outside, the air was sharp, just like that night of the gala, except this time, I wasn't shivering. By the time I reached my car, I wasn't angry anymore. Just free. That's when I realized I hadn't just won. I'd evolved. After that meeting, I didn't hear from Ryan again for months. Life went on. My company grew faster than I'd expected. We landed 2 big clients, both former investors of Ryan's who'd quietly shifted their business to me after reading the exposé. I didn't chase them. They came on their own, drawn to the calm competence he'd once mocked. It was poetic in the most practical way. Sometimes I'd walk past the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back. I wasn't the trembling wife who'd once hidden in the bathroom to cry quietly. I was sharper now, grounded. My confidence wasn't built on someone else's validation. It came from surviving what was meant to destroy me. One evening, after a long day, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, the city lights flickering below. My phone buzzed, a notification from a business news app. Headline: Former investor Ryan Blake declares bankruptcy. Ex-wife launches $1 million consulting firm. I read it twice, then set the phone down. No smile this time. No bitterness either. Just closure. Because the truth was, he was no longer the villain in my story. He was just a chapter. A warning. A week later, I spoke at a women's business summit. Standing under the bright lights, microphone in hand, I looked at the audience of faces, some hopeful, some wounded, all listening. I told them the truth. Revenge won't heal you, but self-respect will. Don't fight to destroy someone else. Fight to rebuild yourself. Afterward, a woman in her 40s came up to me, tears in her eyes. I left my cheating husband last year, she said. Hearing you talk makes me think maybe I can start again too. I hugged her. You can, and you'll be stronger for it. Driving home that night, I realized something. I didn't need to erase what happened to be free from it. I just had to own it. Every humiliation, every lie, every cold night alone. They were all part of the foundation I'd built under myself. When I got home, I walked into my office, the same kind of room where Ryan used to lock me out. Except now the desk was mine. The laptop, the plans, the future, all mine. I looked at the gold satin gown hanging in the corner of my closet, the one I'd worn the night he betrayed me. I hadn't thrown it away. Instead, I sold it at auction last week. The money? I donated it to a shelter for women starting over. Because that gown didn't define my worst night anymore. It financed someone else's new beginning. As I shut down my laptop, I whispered to myself, you lost him, but you found yourself. And that's how I became richer than the man who once thought he owned me. Not just in money, but in peace, in purpose, and in power. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know below. And don't forget to follow for more real stories like this.